Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. And Pete, thanks very much for being here. And to start with, please introduce yourself and tell us about the great work that you do.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for having me on your great show, and I really appreciate your listeners' time as well. I'm actually grateful to have several things that keep me busy. I'm the president of what I call the greatest interior landscaping company in the San Francisco Bay Area, Office Plants by Everything Grows. In addition, I serve as an adjunct professor for Antioch University, where I help inspire my students to develop and apply concepts of marketing specifically to their area of interest. I'm also a TEDx speaker, best-selling author on reducing stress in your everyday life. And unfortunately, I learned the hard way that trading your health for your career is a very bad trade. And lastly, but certainly not least, I also do volunteer work supporting my community in being able to laugh more through laughter yoga classes. And I'm also an improv comedy performer.
Yeah, it was that when I read your bio, it was that last bit that caught me. Well, actually, not the last bit, but there are two things that I took away from reading about you. One was the variety of stuff that you're involved in. I think that's just fantastic. And then secondly, the improv bit. So when we choose a card at random, this is just going to be normal for you, right?
Absolutely. So we'll just go with it.
So I've tipped the card deck out, and so I've
Okay.
got a big pile here. How many piles would you like me to make in front of me?
Let's do four.
Four, okay. And I'll make them different sizes, so I'm not trying to
Okay.
make them the same size. So would you like pile one on my left through two, three, and four on my right?
Let's do three.
Okay. So that's reason. So we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. So a number between
Ah, so a number between that. Let's go ahead and do 17.
17. So I'm going to go from the back because that'll be quicker.
Okay.
19, 18. Ah, okay. Well, let's see what you think of the card that you've chosen. Curiosity.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. And the first question is this. What does curiosity mean? And what does it look, sound, and feel like?
Well, not taking a definite, a dictionary definition of curiosity. What curiosity means to me is being able to be open to new experiences. So, being able to want to ask the question, what is that? Why is that? Those classic being more investigative about something and wanting to know either how something works, how something uh, evolves. And you have to be present to be able to be curious, in my opinion, because when we are focused on the past or ruminating about something that we are guilty about, or something that we either did or didn't do in the past, or we're anxious about something in the future, we're not living in the present. And when we get to live in the present, we can be curious and find various things to learn more about and to continue to grow. So that's why curiosity is a wonderful value. Forget, give me that second half of the questions.
So the second half is kind of metaphoric. So when you think of curiosity, what
Mhm.
images come to mind, what sounds come to mind, and what feelings come to mind?
Well, what image comes to my mind is actually a light bulb, because kind of getting more of an idea about something, learning more about it. What sound comes to mind is kind of like this, you know, or higher pitched, kind of like dee like this, like
Yeah.
maybe what am I figuring out here? That to me is what it would really sound like as well. Um, and that's really all that comes to mind.
And what about feelings, Pete?
Yeah, I actually, when I think about being curious, I actually my energy level goes up,
Yeah,
because when you have to be curious about, or when you want to find out more about something, it's more proactive. It's
yeah,
not reactive, because when you're proactive, you want to learn more. You want to figure something out. And so it actually is it's a stimulus. So to me, the blood flows more and it's more exciting.
great. And there's a couple of things that I'd just like to add. So exploring comes to my mind when I think about
Hmm.
curiosity.
Hmm.
And it's this anticipation of the unknown, actually. It's like you're really not sure where it's going to go,
Hmm.
but that's okay. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's better than you thought, sometimes it's not as good as you thought. Um,
That's really perfect. And in fact, as you were describing that, Alan, I thought about any time I get to travel somewhere I haven't been before,
yeah,
especially if it's a different country, because yeah, you don't know, you can read about the country, you can have things that you can kind of expect, but until you experience it firsthand, you don't know for sure what you're going to be experiencing. And so I think your description there works perfectly for that.
mm. And then there's something, when you were talking about why, the question
Hmm.
why, and it is a wonderful question, but you've reminded me of a story. I was at an awards dinner with a group of leaders from across Europe. And I was sat next to a German guy who's a good friend. And Tobias, he said to me, and I'll do his German accent a little bit. I hope he won't mind me doing this, but if he listens to us. He said, Alan, the ladies from Russia on the table at the back of the room have flowers in their hair. Why? And so I looked at him and said, Tobias, why not? And that whenever we talk now, we joke about that why not? Because I think whilst why is a brilliant question, I
Yep.
also love why not. Because
Yes.
otherwise it stops us doing stuff sometimes for really not much of a reason.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when you say why versus why not, the why not actually, to me, is more positive.
Yeah,
Because if you think about it, asking why, it could be like, well, why are you doing that? Kind of judgmental,
yeah.
versus why not? Because it's like, yeah, have fun.
And on the metaphors, you inspired me actually, because when you said a light bulb,
Hmm.
for me the image of curiosity became a light spreading. So turning the darkness into light through your
Hmm.
curiosity, which I've
Hmm.
been through. Um, and in terms of feelings, for me, it's like excitement and anticipation and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's been a great kind of intro into the topic. So let's get really quite practical now. So, where have you noticed a lack of curiosity?
Oh gosh. Well, we were talking about this before we started the recording, but in the political system, that that lacks curiosity, because it's all about, unfortunately, in the US, stonewalling each other. That's a very specific area. A lot of times too, unfortunately, I worked in my career with a lot of different companies that did not have curiosity in terms of figuring out different ways to do things or come up with better products. Often what ends up happening with organizations, they figure out one way, a solution to a particular problem, and then they don't expand from there. They just keep that same system, that same product in place, and they don't extend it to other applications, or they don't change it around for fear that, oh, well, that's taking a risk. The problem is that when we don't take risks, we stay the same. And so, and when we don't take risks, we're primarily doing that because we have this fear of failure. And
Mhm.
what I find is that often, especially with ourselves, when we think about being fearful, or that word fear, it really is an acronym. It's an acronym that I like to define as fictional evidence appearing real. So,
Love that.
yeah, I mean, because often we let our inner critic inside of us dictate what we're going to do or not do, more likely.
Yeah.
And, our inner critic is not a bad thing to have. What the inner critic is doing is it's just doesn't want us to fail. But the reality is, whenever we extend ourselves beyond our comfort zone, well, of course, we're going to run into some roadblocks. And the reason is because we're in uncharted territory. So, you know, in order to be curious, we have to get out of our comfort zone. And it's just about stretching ourselves a little bit more. And we are going to grow from it if we allow ourselves to be curious.
Mhm. And so you talked about the political system, so that's kind of very big. I think my example of where I notice a lack of curiosity is in a world where we're super connected through social media. It seems to me
Mhm.
that people receive information, and then many people display little curiosity to verify whether
Uh,
what they're receiving is true or not.
mhm,
Just seems that, so it's like, oh yeah, this whatever it is, because I've received it's true, and so much is not. Um,
mhm,
and this might sound a bit kind of nerdy, but if I receive something from even a friend, or much more so if it's somebody that I don't know, I kind of check it out, just as a natural reaction, because
mhm.
it's like, who's to say that's right? And I don't know. It's become a bit of a reflex action, actually, and I'm not sure whether that's healthy or not. But the number of times that I've found stuff, well, actually, either it's kind of slightly off, or on some occasions it's just completely wrong.
Yeah, and it's very true, because the problem is that especially in social media, the way the analytics work on those systems is that what they do is, and the algorithm is designed specifically for this, that wants to give you whatever you're interested in. And
Yeah,
so when you're on social media and you're scrolling and you're clicking on particular, let's say, articles that are of a specific um, position, it's going to give you more and more of that, whether or not it's true or not.
yeah,
And so what ends up happening is, instead of getting, at least a more of a balanced view of both sides, you're getting skewed from social media, the algorithms, to get all of the information, or the vast majority of the information, specifically to your interest, or let's say your perception of the world. And so it gets it harder to have more of a balanced view. And, unfortunately, then you see people that are just, they see something, they don't verify it, and then they just start spreading it, and it continues to go as a wildfire. And it's too bad. And with the advent of AI now, it's going to become much worse, because the way that the AI software can actually change things, like put a celebrity and you know their likeness on certain articles, and then you think, oh, of course, if this person is saying this, then it must be true, let's say. Or, wow, this I need to send this to all of my followers. And so it spreads so quickly, and if it's completely false, if it's not true by any stretch of the imagination, but there's going to be people who say, oh my gosh, and then they start talking about it, that whole electronic word of mouth that spreads so rapidly, especially if it's something negative,
yeah,
because from our human nature is one that, we are much more likely to spread negative news, negative content than we are to spread positive news. And it's too bad because what ends up happening is that the negative news, especially if it's something that has affected us, we have more of a need to get the word out on that so that other people don't experience that. So I appreciate that from a human nature standpoint, but unfortunately, the positive news is what so many of us need to hear because there's so much negativity out there, and we need to be able to balance that with some positivity.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, this point is making me question myself because I do quite a lot of work in the customer experience space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in that space, it's kind of commonly accepted that you should give the customer what they want. That
Mm-hmm.
seems to be perfectly reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But in this situation that you've just described with the algorithms, so that's all they're doing. They're just giving the customer what they want, right? If you're
Right.
interested, I'll give you some more. But so I'm questioning myself because that's not that can't well, it doesn't feel right. You should
Mm-hmm.
how valuable is the truth or what cost of giving the customer what they want when it means the truth is not total or is actually radically affected.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to me, it's very concerning because when something that is completely false spreads, the problem is, let's say if it's really hurtful to someone
Yeah.
and they didn't deserve it, good luck trying to change the perception of all those people that got exposed to that complete untruth negativity.
Mm.
That's a real problem. It used to be said, as a marketing professor, one of the things that I teach is publicity. And the old adage about that there's no such thing as bad publicity really doesn't apply anymore because if there's this firestorm of negativity that actually is not true, it really is hard to change that perception because there'll always be people who say, well, there must, where there's smoke, there must be fire, right? And so they think that there must be something true to that. And it may not be the case. It just happened to be that somebody or something like an AI went ahead and spread it. And so I think it's going to be much more challenging in the future. And hopefully, the social media networks will be able to have some sort of integrated software where if you see something, you can just press a button and just say, is this true or not? And hopefully it objectively can answer that for you because I don't think people in general who are scrolling social media will go to the effort to try and see whether or not it's true or not. I know you mentioned it. I do it because I'm a professor and I'm used to doing that because when I review my students' work, if I suspect that there's something that hasn't been sourced properly or has been plagiarized or is just so out there that I need to double check it. So if I suspect something like that, I will go to the effort to check it on social media. However, the vast majority of users are not going to do that. So you have to make it easy. It has to be just a
Yeah,
button
I agree.
and a trustworthy button to see whether or not this is true.
Yeah. There's a couple of things there. I think I was just thinking about what my motivation is actually for the checking, and in part it's wanting to validate, but the other
Mhm.
bit of it is that I don't want to send people stuff that's not true, that's not right, because
Right.
that reflects poorly on me if they find out
Mhm.
that it's not right. Um,
Mhm.
and then the other thing that comes to mind as well is that so we've talked about mistruths or untruths being spread. And then the other dynamic is that we live in a world now that is so fast changing and dynamic compared to, say, 60, 70 years ago, where you might be able to predict with reasonable confidence what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Whereas
Mhm.
now we're much less able to do that. And so
Mhm.
those two things, the spread of misinformation and also this dynamic environment, makes me think that teaching curiosity at a young age is actually a potential antidote to all of that happening. Because if people displayed curiosity, then it feels like they would be much better equipped in this environment that we're just discussing.
I totally agree with you. And especially when the children are up to the age of 7, because that's when they're most curious. And it's most statistics and research has shown that the children, as they're growing up, that first 7 years, maybe 8, 9, depending on the child, but the first 7 years is where their being is being formed,
Yeah,
their belief systems, their perception of the world, etc. And so if part of that is take their curiosity and have them say, okay, you're curious about this, make sure that here are ways to confirm that this what you're discovering is indeed true. That's going to be critical because the children of today, it's they're locked to their phones. Any of the kids that have their own phones, their electronics, they're just sitting on that. That's the how they're going to communicate. And it's, as you said, 60 to 70 years ago. I think back to, let's say, when I was in high school, and you know you heard a rumor. Well, it was a rumor. You don't know whether or not it's true or not. You kind of think, oh wow. And then what did you do? You started asking other people, did you hear this? Do you know anything different about this? Well, unfortunately, now with electronics, so it can spread so rapidly. And if there's some sort of digital asset that goes along with it, like a photo, etc.,
yeah,
that really can be devastating to a child, that they can't, they feel like, oh my gosh, we can't recover from this embarrassment, let's say. So it's very, very important for kids to be able to understand that, making sure that what they're seeing is actually, this curiosity that they have, that it is indeed true. One thing can be, to have some fun and to be creative. Like, I love to ask this question of people, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So if you truly think about that question, you can really expand your creativity and think about all these different things that you could do. There's going to be some difficulty with that, but when you're seeing something, when you're reading something or you see something, a picture, and you just think, oh my God, oh my gosh, and this is, I need to immediately spread this to all over the place. it it would really be good to take a moment and just say, wait a minute, is this true, or is this
yeah,
some
yeah,
sort of a fake thing that gets people? Because unfortunately, there's going to always be people and organizations that want to spread uh, their content
yeah,
just because they don't care how they do it. They just want to get it out there, and they don't care who they hurt. They don't care how they do it. They just want it to spread as fast as possible. And unfortunately, as we talked earlier, the negative content is what typically is going to spread so rapidly.
yeah. And I'm going to share with you a story about children's curiosity. So I went to see my 4 and 3/4 year old grandson last weekend, and we went to the park. I'm not sure how this will translate actually, because in the street, I don't know what you call them, but they're like metal covers which give access to either pipes or wires under the pavement.
Oh,
side.
We call those manhole covers.
Okay, so this was a small one. It wasn't
Mhm.
very big at all, and it had blue paint daubed on it. And I think they
Mhm.
use different paint colors sometimes to tell them which direction something's going in or what's underneath or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Anyway, Jacob was on his scooter and he stopped at this cover and he was looking at it. And I said to him, "Oh, come on, what is it you're waiting for?" And he just looked at me and he said, "Who in the whole world would do that?" And of course, I had to say, "I have no idea."
I love it. I love it because he's asking who,
And
so it's
wouldn't it be great if we could take that level of curiosity and inspire children to retain that through to adulthood? What a
Mhm.
wonderful asset that would be for humankind.
It really, really would be. And it's interesting that asking these questions, it really it's it won't hurt if you're will if you as long as I think ask it in the right way. um we go back to that why question versus why not. If you phrase why, like, and I like I maybe I give a frown like that, I'm saying, I'm asking you why, because I'm inferring that you're wrong.
Yeah,
But by asking the questions, like, what I like to say is open-ended questions.
yeah,
So you don't want to ask a question like, what is your name, or yes or no, things like that. Because that's those one-word answers don't really, they give you information, but they don't expand your curiosity.
yeah,
The curious want to expand and start thinking, okay, so let's get some more dialogue around this. And you thinking about what your grandson did, it's fun because if we can tap into our inner child, we can do that as well. And so as you were describing that story, I was putting myself in your grandson's shoes and looking at that blue cover, and it's like, wait a minute, this blue cover versus the asphalt of the road. And it's like, wow, that's interesting. Why is it blue?
yeah,
It's like, so I love it. I mean, in one of the, we mentioned about improv. One of the, uh, I would say, skits that you do on stage is to only ask. So two people will be up there on stage, only speaking in questions. And it is actually a very challenging thing to do as an adult, because you want to keep the conversation going, but only in questions. If you say a statement, then you're out. So it's a really challenging thing, but it all requires listening skills, and being, once again, present, as we talked about earlier. Because if I say to you, Alan, that you know why did you bring up that story about your grandson, and you could say something back to me like, uh wouldn't
let
you
me have a
think it
go.
would be a good, yeah, right. So you would say, like, wouldn't the listeners love to hear that story, kind of things back and forth. And so uh because we are trained to answer questions,
Yeah,
versus you know asking a question or responding to a question with another question. But I love the fact that children, I've got a grandchild as well, and this asking why. I mean, I remember when my kids were young, and they would ask, well, what about this? What about that? And I'm glad that I didn't say, oh gosh, not again. Because the thing is that I put myself in their shoes. And it's like, of course they're asking because they're curious.
mm,
They're curious. They're learning. And so to me, as an educator, I really want to tap into that.
yeah. And you made me curious a few minutes ago when you asked that question. about if you couldn't fail, what would you do if you couldn't, if you weren't going to fail or something like that?
Yeah.
So what's your answer to your question?
Well, to me, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? I would probably climb Mount Everest.
Okay.
I'd love to go into space. I would try and I would like to swim the English Channel, you know,
Okay.
like that. Those are first three things that come to my mind.
All right. I've only got two. One is a flying suit. Have you seen the videos?
Oh, yes, the squirrel suit kind of things,
Yeah, yeah,
flying
yeah,
squirrel. Oh, terrifying. Yeah,
yeah.
that would be, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the other one would be, actually you mentioning the channel, so I'd love to swim with dolphins
Mm-hmm.
under the sea. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to with and actually just a piece of information. When you were talking about questions and that improv exercise or whatever you want to call it, uh, I'll just read out to you the first word of each of the questions on the back of the card decks, which you might have looked at already since you've received yours. But it's
Mm-hmm.
what, where, when, how. And then the next one is this. So ask your own question about curiosity, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how.
Hmm. How would you recommend teaching curiosity to someone who appears to have lost their curious mind?
Oh, what a great question. And do you have some idea in the first instance, or would you like me to go first?
Well, I would answer it first and foremost with stay present. Don't let yourself be distracted by your phone, by outside distractions. Like, for example, why I wear this air traffic controller headset is because when I'm on a call like we are right now, I want to make sure that I'm 100% present with you. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not checking email. I'm not, looking at what my cat's doing, whatever it happens to be. I'm 100% focused and present. So I think that first and foremost is most important to be able to be curious, because when you're present, you tend to notice things. And so
Mhm.
that would be my first and foremost.
Okay. And the first thing that comes to mind for me, I when I do workshops, I tend to make them very experiential rather than, teaching
Mhm.
people stuff. So I think what I would do is set up some form of an exercise where the people get something fantastic that they weren't expecting if they made the choice to be curious, compared to those who played it safer and kind of just ended up with something really dull and boring. And then for everybody to be aware of that so that people would be encouraged in the future to be a bit more curious. So that's a starting point, I think, for me.
Yeah, I love that. And as you were describing that to me, it reminds me, based on what we were talking about earlier, to be willing to get a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because when we get out of our comfort zone, we don't know what exactly is going to happen, but we're going to grow. We're either going to find something that works, or we're going to get feedback, not a roadblock, but a feedback that we need to try something else. And
Yeah.
so, but we can only do that when we continue to stretch ourselves.
And you've just, so this happens actually in ValuesJam. You'll find this when you play the game, Pete. What sometimes happens is that you're reminded of things from the past, either memories or events, sometimes
Mhm.
quite recent, sometimes that haven't crossed your mind for quite some time. And this one is not too long ago. It's about Jacob again, but I haven't really thought about this probably since it happened. But we were in a museum and we were looking at a picture and it was time for us to move on. And I said to him, Jacob, what do you think's around that corner? And he said, I don't know. So I said, well, shall we go and have a look? And we crept along the wall until we got to the corner. And then I said, are you ready? Let's look now. And we looked, and it was just another corridor, but it was just such good fun out of something very mundane. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It reminds me of when my kids were younger, and when we would go to like a school haunted house kind of thing. And it was the exact same thing. We don't know what's going around the corner. Oh, like this. And it's just so fun because it's not going to hurt you. But you let your mind wander and think, oh, okay, could it be? And so we imagine these different things. So and it's so much fun when we can tap back into our inner child. It really is. Unfortunately, as adults, we've lost our not only our curiosity that we had as kids. I shouldn't say lost, but our curiosity is so much more reduced. The same thing goes with laughter, because as kids we would laugh potentially. Let's say a 6, 7 year old would laugh maybe 100 times a day. And as adults, if we laugh 5 times a day, we're lucky. And so, the reason is because we get inundated with all those responsibilities and worries, anxiety and guilt and all these different things, instead of that take us away from enjoying being in the moment.
yeah. And you've made me curious now, and this will bring us to the last question because we're going to wrap up the values jam now. But the last question on the card is, what are you encouraged to do differently about curiosity as a result of our conversation today?
Oh, that's a very good question. For me, I think that I need to when when basically with my students in particular with marketing, the marketing is part of it is being very creative, especially when it comes to the promotional side of it, the advertising, etc.
Yeah.
And what I want them to do is, instead of just saying, oh, okay, we're going to do advertising, or we're going to do digital marketing, or we're going to do social media, etc. I think what I am going to add to their, you know, the stuff that they should be considering is going back to that question, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So when they're working on their marketing plans, yes, there's going to be the typical stuff that they're going to recommend, but let them go ahead and have a little fun with it too, and answer the question, in this perfect scenario, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
I think
And
that's
I'd like to see, I think that is going to be what I do.
fantastic. And I'd love to hear back from you to hear about some of the results because I know again, I mentioned doing experiential workshops, and
Mhm.
I tend to try to find, not try, I find a way to let people open their minds up and tap into not just their professional knowledge, but also their life experiences, right? Because
Mhm.
why would you limit somebody's input to just their professional knowledge? And it never ceases to amaze me how much of a contribution you can get from people that are more junior in the organization doing more menial jobs versus the more senior people with the high qualifications and all the rest of it. But if you find a way to allow them to tap into their life experiences, you just get such rich input from some people compared to others. I remember
Absolutely.
I did a project with a prison, and it was mixed. So the wardens or the officers were in the same workshop as the people serving their sentences, and it's a gross generalization, but the people serving their sentences brought so much more than the people that were looking after them in this creative thinking
Mhm.
workshop. It was fascinating.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mine is inspired by what you talked about laughter. I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm going to make a laughter count because I'm curious to understand when you said adults will laugh, if you're lucky 5 times. I'm thinking, I laugh a lot more than that. So, but I don't know how many times I laugh. So
Mhm.
tomorrow, I've got to strike this balance between not forcing it to be as natural as possible, and
Yeah.
also count. So that's what I'm going to do. So thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely. And I hope that you get way more than five. Yeah, it just it really is important because when we laugh, what ends up happening is the positive endorphins in our body get released. And those positive endorphins help fight all the chronic diseases that we can get, as well as depression, etc. So it's so important to laugh, and I'm glad that you becoming more aware of that as well. But you're right. Don't think, oh, that number is a little bit low, so I'm going to just go, ha, 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 ha. Actually, a simulated laugh like that can be helpful. But you are, or then you're also skewing your numbers if you do that.
And actually, I've just realized it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, so I must make sure I laugh at appropriate times, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, and it should be a happy day. In fact, but it's interesting. I remember one of my single friends um, said, "Yeah, it's Valentine's Day is also Singles Awareness Day."
I like that. And do you know that that's an acronym, right?
Awareness Day. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's sad. Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that. And actually, I'll leave you with an acronym and then we'll close the call. So I heard this the other day and I really enjoyed it. And it is, um, I can't remember it now. What is it? Copy how I live daily.
So, child.
So the point is
Yeah.
that your children will copy how you live daily. And I thought that was a fantastic acronym to remember, actually. So,
Yeah. It's a great one.
so Pete, thank you so much. And I've really enjoyed this exploration of curiosity. I trust you have as well. And I'll look forward to doing it again sometime, maybe.
Yeah, Alan, I really appreciate you having me on the show. I've so enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully our the listeners have enjoyed it as well.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, Pete.
Bye bye.